a fresh perspective on what to do with your food scraps. When you compost, you are creating such a micro-rich, dense food that is readily available for your plants to be able to absorb. And it's not dependent on that. It's going to continue to feed it. All of those micronutrients are working below the soil level. I don't know if you've ever thought about this, but there's a whole host of things going on below the soil. One reason why you wouldn't want to till your soil, because you would destroy those living organisms. This shows you the different trophic levels of what is going on, because everything is decomposing, that is decomposing your food scraps. As you toss them in, the natural process of composting begins. And those composters immediately come to that. Now, some of those composters are going to be eaten, and them also in turn will be eaten, and it just cycles on down. But everything is a life web for your plants, to where your plants can grow deeper and wider root system that's going to protect them against disease and pest resistance. That's the key. We don't grow plants. We grow soil that grows our plants. That's the key. If you think about it, it's all in the soil. Everything that they need is in the right component for them to be able to absorb it. You know, if you took vitamins and they didn't get absorbed, it wouldn't do any good. If you ate a food that wasn't good for your body, it would get. So the same thing is true about our plants. And this is what compost will look like. It's a dark, rich color. It's earthy and has an earthy fragrance. And here you'll even see a little fungi and bacteria, because those are all part of what is feeding off each other. The microbes are doing all the work for you. So really, composting and organic gardening is a lazy way of gardening. You let nature do what it's been intended to for billions of years. And when you keep your microbes happy, they're going to keep doing the work for you. There's several different things that you want to consider in your compost pile. 4 things. You need air, you need moisture, you need nitrogen, and you need carbon in the right measurements. You can layer your compost, but to allow the air to penetrate and feed all the microbes, you do have to stir it. Some of the things that you need to do that would be some supplies you'd want to have handy. Maybe it could be a rod, it could be a stick, or something that you kind of stick in there, poke some air holes. This is a gardening spade, and this is a new one for me. I gave good use to my other one, but you want to look for something that's going to have those long tines. And I noticed when I looked online for this, the pitchforks were a different design. So gardening spade is what I would recommend you searching for. But you start, anyone can compost in their home, even if you live in an apartment. You just need to consider those 4 things and keep them in the right balance so your microbes are feeding off each other. The first place to start is to think about what kind of container do you need. Start in the kitchen, something that's simple. You may have a trash bowl like this. Like when I do my food preparation, I pull out a bowl. Welcome. I pull out a bowl and I I get something to cover it. It could be just a towel or anything. But I love these stretchy covers like this. And just kind of put that on there so that everything can be kept in place, not attracting any flies or anything else. And you can even store this in your refrigerator or even your freezer. Some people like a blender method of composting where they take those food scraps, they throw them in the blender, blend it all up to where all of those nutrients are in small pieces, and it makes the microorganisms have an easier time of breaking that down. It's already started. So the smaller you have those pieces, the faster your compost will decompose. When you have a pile, the larger branches, you've got some limbs and bigger leaves and things like that, put those at the very bottom. Start with perhaps a layer of twigs. You could have cardboard. That's your friend. You know, there's so much cardboard that's being thrown away in our landfills, creating CO2 gases that is harmful to our environment. And I know you all care about kids and grandkids. That's creating an anaerobic atmosphere that is leaching oxygen and putting carbon dioxide and greenhouse methane gas into the environment. So by composting, we can divert so much of our trash, our landscape scraps, and our food scraps into a useful, beneficial thing for our gardens and even your plants, all of your plant life. So I feed my plants just compost, and it will continue to feed upon itself and grow richer and richer over the years to where it saves you money. It saves you money in even watering. You know, it's going to reduce your watering bill because an aerobic compost is your finished compost. That means it's got the right combination of oxygen in it, and which is about 40 to 50% damp, not swampy wet, and it also has the right amount of air in it. So in contrast, if you send those food scraps to the landfill, you know, they're all getting compressed down to where there's no oxygen. So that is not able to be decomposed. It's going to create the green gases that you don't want in, and you can divert that. You know, if you divert a ton of CO2 from the landfills, that's saving a ton of CO2 methane into your environment. So that's how powerful it is, and you can be a world changer in the world that you live in. So I really appreciate you taking time to think about this, and I hope gain a new mindset of what you do. I want you to think, when you leave here today, I want you to think about, okay, what am I going to do when I'm peeling this banana? You're not going to throw it in your trash, are you? No. I hope you never again will do so. Now, if you leave out a fragrant banana peel, it's going to attract flies. They love yellow. So you want to put it in a closed container. You can use anything. This is just a recycled plastic container that you probably have all over your kitchen, that you could just stick it in there until you take it to another place that you would compost it. That's just the start. So that's the first step, is to think about, where am I going to put that vegetable peel, that fruit peeling, that it doesn't go in the trash. Okay? So that's the first step. So think about it and don't put it in the trash anymore. I've been known to go and dig them out of the trash. Now, if you put a bunch of food scraps in the bottom of a closed container, it's going to develop some moisture. It's going to start decomposing right away. You might add some cardboard, like your paper rolls, your paper towel rolls, that's just a perfect thin brown paper. It's excellent carbon for you to use for composting. And you could put that in there just kind of, and that'll help to start the process. Even if it's just leaves, it starts that. They make really cute ones. Flowers, here's one of mine. It has a lid where you put a carbon filter on it. You can buy the sheets of carbon filters, and you just cut the size of the lid and glue it to the top of your filter. And so that will help keep the fragrance of those ripe fruits that are decomposing from attracting any unwanted insects or anything like that. But they make darling ones. They make cute stainless steel. This is like a gallon. They have a couple of gallon sizes, but anything like that. You can either be recycling your plastic bags to keep it clean, and just toss it out, give it an extra use, or you could use a compostable type bag in there that you could just throw it in there. The things that you're using, they're keeping in between, they can be kept in the refrigerator for a longer period of time. You can even freeze them till you've gathered enough to go and put somewhere in the ground. Cardboard is a valuable source of carbon. I'm going to pull this out. And you can even compost in a cardboard box. Now, this is just a box that I got with my order from Thrive Market, and it had great brown paper, useful for my compost bin. But if I were just using my cardboard box, I could go put this someplace in where it can be. We don't want to put our compost bins on concrete because there's not a connection with the microorganisms that are going to feed from that end. Okay, so you want to put it on the ground where it can have that right translation of the microorganisms between them. But let's say I just took this and brown paper and I left some at the bottom, and then I put some food scraps in there, and then I put some brown paper in that, and you see how simple that is? Just any container will do. Now, if you use a plastic container, some people use large trash cans, or really any size trash can. You need to put some holes in it so it has some air, and it also from the bottom so that it can drain. All right, drainage is important. The correct moisture level is important. If it's too swampy, too wet, it's gonna squeeze out the air that is needed for the composition process. If it doesn't have enough moisture in it, it's going to not feed the microorganisms that are needing that moisture. So if we kill those off because they don't have moisture, that can have an impact on your compost pile. So those are some things to keep in mind, that you're keeping it at the right air and moisture levels. All of the nutrients that a plant needs, they're feeding from what is going on below in your plant. You see those roots going there, but when you give your food, your plants what they need, it's going to be just a dynamic living system going on beneath the soil that we don't even realize is going on. And this is what will be the difference. Those roots will grow a lot deeper so they can get the moisture that they need, and the air will be broken up in the soil because the microorganisms are going to be working that far down. Does that make sense? Do you understand what I'm saying there? So it's very important to keep that balance in there. There are different kinds of, here's another container. You see these, just a little, anything, really anything with a lid. Just something easy. You want to start with something easy that you can use and maybe mark it so the other members of your family know that that's the process you want to use for composting. It's like no more peelings in the trash. Let's do something useful for that. and promote that thinking for them. Composting is simple. It's hard to mess it up. It really truly is. If you think about those 4 things, okay? You start with figuring out what kind of container, and then if you're going to compost outside, you'll need a larger container. So for example, I use something like this out on my patio. I like walking out to my compost bin. It's at the corner, in the back corner of my yard. But if it were a rainy time over days, I'd put it in something like this, that it could be housed in between time. Do you follow what I'm saying? If you get them, I use a lot of produce, so I can put more in there. And in the bottom of it, I keep some brown matter. I keep some brown paper, leaves. Could use straw. And I have a list of all kinds of things that you can use. I'm going to share a few of them that actually, it's more than you could even imagine. One thing I never thought of that could be compostable was sheetrock. Do you know there's boron in sheetrock? And I actually tried it. We had done some, Ramona and I had some scraps. I didn't use big pieces, but some things that were just some scrap, and I put them in my compost pile. It was all composted up. I was like shocked. So there's more that can be composted than you realize. But back to helping you to understand the right things, because you have to have a right ratio. The green matter is if you think of it as things that have been living most recently. So that's going to be your food scraps, your landscape waste, things like that. So table scraps, fruit scraps, vegetable scraps, your fresh grass clippings, flowers, seaweed and kelp, chicken manure, horse manure. I had a friend dropped off some horse manure just to recycle it, and I said, well, sure, I don't want that going in into the landfill. I can incorporate that into my compost. Your tea leaves, what do you do with your tea bag? With your coffee grounds, corn cob stalks, hedge clippings, garden waste, fresh leaves. So, one caution about the leaves, when I see leaves by the side of the road, I want them. I see them as something valuable that I can turn into nutrients for my plants. But what if they put chemicals on it? See, we're feeding a host of living organisms, and pesticides are designed to kill. And it's going to kill what's in your compost. So you don't want to introduce anything that's going to be detrimental to that. Also, things that would not compost, like glass, metal, even treated lumber. If you have some treated things, see, that's got things in it that's not going to compost well. Your charcoal ashes. Think about, there's chemicals in that because for igniting it. So that would not be helpful amendment. So things like that you want to avoid putting in. Be careful of the waste that's put in it. Like I said, be sure it's an herbivore animal that's going to have the right start. Because what you put in comes out. And again, remember, it's our plants that grow on, it's the soil. We don't feed our plants. It's our soil that feeds our plants. All right, so more things too. So let's talk about the brown things. So naturally, your dry leaves, your straw and hay, your pine needles, pine cones, chopped twigs and branches, wood ash that's not been treated. You understand the difference? Not charcoal ash, but wood ash. If you have a wood burning fireplace and you've not put any chemicals on that, that would be a good amendment. Shredded paper, avoid the glossy paper, and avoid paper that's colored, like magazines are not a good source, because those colored ink have a lot of toxins in them, and we want to avoid adding those toxins to our pile. Dryer lint, What do you do with your dryer lint? So keep you a little container at your dryer and, put that there. Now, except if you are using some kind of chemicals, some softeners that maybe wouldn't be a good addition. So you've got to think about those things. It's still compost, it's just not going to be the best for those things. Sawdust, like if anyone you know that's doing a little wood project, get that. Those things, and that's a great thing to put. See, it's already been ground up. It's already started to break down. So that's a great thing to put at the bottom of your pile, or even to put in between. We need the right ratios to host a good decomposition level. So basically, you want about 1 part of green matter to 3 parts of brown matter. And the way you'll know it's correct is you're going to see it heating up. You're going to see it decomposing. If something is not in the right ratio, you just add more of the other. Do you understand what I'm saying? And when you add a layer, consider sprinkling that with water so it's already started to have some moisture on it. You might keep your leaves already moistened. If you're working a pile, you might keep them in a bin that you keep them watered. I have a bin that I keep some leaves in. I have a whole section for that. But I have a bin that when I go and sprinkle some water on my pile when I'm working it, I add a little bit of water to it as well. So it's getting a little bit of it will naturally, just like your forest beds. That's the richest soil, and look how well it composts down. And all of that is just a host of nutrients. So keep those ratios there. But even if you don't it's going to happen naturally. Composting is nature's way to compost. It truly is. It's hard to mess it up. Now, what about some troubleshooting? What if something, it shouldn't stink. Your compost pile should not stink. That would mean that you probably perhaps have too much moisture. It's too swampy. If you were to grab a handful of compost, like if I grab my compost, it would be like a sponge that it'd feel moist. So I hope that understanding that, I think, will help you to be more motivated to do that. And to see that when you see those things in the pile, you just see a host of living things that are working on your behalf. Now, a compost pile starts with heavy enough twigs that there'll be some air to that. Remember, you can put your cardboard down because your earthworms and other insects are going to be drawn to that, and they're going to come up from that, okay? But as you have some of those levels where you have things that are a little bit harder to decompose, it's going to add life over a longer period of time. So you have all different levels that we're feeding. So that's what we think about. We want them smaller to where they're eating off of one another, but also the larger ones that are being fed, different nutrients. Tending those microbes, that's the key. Having the right layer of things and offering the air. Now, your compost will be active in fact, I was checking and y'all, I'm sorry, it's so exciting to me. And I reach down in there, I'm turning my pile, and I see this heat. I mean, it's just steam coming out from that, just the heat where that is actively working, decomposing things. So you may start off with a pile that it grows up here, and it will work down into a very rich, nutrient-rich food that nothing else can compare with for your plants. You see what I'm saying? When we add artificial fertilizers, that plant is dependent on that food. When we give them compost, we're feeding what is naturally occurring that's going to keep working a balanced system to keep a healthy system growing. Do you understand the difference? Does that make sense? Okay. So we want to keep it to where we're getting air to it, to where it's going to naturally be incorporating. So you're going to turn it every so often, even if you have, it's going to, when I take my food scraps and things, it's going to naturally start decomposing. Where it matters most is when you put it in a larger pile, okay? But you can start anywhere. You could go dig a hole in the ground and just start that, especially around wherever you're gardening. So if you have prospects of growing a garden, start designing where that would be, and go ahead and put your cardboard down, put some newspaper down, and let that start putting the twigs down. Just let that prepare to do the work. We volunteered at the Herman Park Zoo and Park on Earth Day, and we were pulling up straw, pine needles, leaves, and things. And I was most interested in what they were to use that for. I said, "Are y'all composting this?" In fact, they took me to where they composted, and there was an area that they said, "This is going to be," we call it our moon garden. It's going to be a garden that we're going to propagate a few years from now, but this is the start of it. Well, that's music to my ears. That's exactly what we're doing, right? So think of it in stages and having the right ratio of things working. Now, there are different types of composting, and especially for small things. There's verma composting, which is with worms. They use red wigglers that eat that food, and I tell you, they eat large quantities of food scraps. So if you have a larger quantity of food scraps, that might be a way that you would want to compost. There's many different types of composting. I'm sharing more the basic composting system, but you might look at the different ones to consider as to what would be right for you. And I also use vermicomposting with red wigglers, but mine didn't like the cold. When I had it, so I lost some words. They do have to be protected from that. They do have a high tolerance to that cold, but that's one thing to consider. And people will do that right in their kitchen. There are different types of composting methods that can be totally done in home. And even if you don't have a large amount of brown matter, although in these days with cardboard boxes and like I said, your toilet paper rolls and just keep all of those and tear them up so you have the little pieces to be available. But that's the thing I'm constantly trying to find to get the right ratio, is to have enough of the brown matter to balance the 1 to 3 kind of a ratio. It may, for yours, it may be 1 to 4 amount of browns in it. So you look at it and see, is it getting enough air? Is it heating up to where you see that composition, that decomposition being established there? I've got some of my cards here, and on my website you'll be able to find these kind of diagrams and a list of even 100 different things that you can compost, but you can find that easily on the internet. There's so many different things. I'm going to leave this out though for you to be able to just read over as a thought stimulator, so that you will think of things that you will no longer throw into the landfill. Even old clothing, if it's of natural fiber, if it's cotton, silk, things like that, that's compostable. It's going to be eaten up by the decomposers. So there's so many things, and it's shocking to me, some of the things that we can compost. But all of those things, I'm going to be updating my website more and more over the next week and coming weeks with information about that, so that you'll have that readily available to you. Start with choosing a container. It can be anything, and while you're keeping it in your kitchen, cover it. Okay? Think about adding some brown matter to it, so it's not just a bowl of slush. because as it decomposes, that's going to happen. So put some brown matter, some paper, some clippings, some leaves, or whatever. So you want to have your brown matter and your green, so a place to have both of those so that you're adding to them. Choose your container, choose your location where you want to put that. It can be done in your kitchen. If you want a larger method, it can be done out on your patio. But eventually, for a larger compost to really be effective, you want to have it in contact with the ground, the soil, okay? Remove the grass from that area, and again, either put twigs down, brown paper, newspaper, things like that. Avoid the colored ink in magazines, but all that brown matter, all of this is so valuable. So I hope you'll look at it as valuable sources, and also what we are diverting from the landfill. Use, I like to cover my compost bin, and I just use natural pieces of cardboard for mine. I have a larger one. I think there's a picture of mine at the front. I'll get it. But so that nothing else wants to get inside it. Do you understand? If you put something directly on top of it, it's just like inviting something to want to come play with it. Okay? So any of your pets in the neighborhood or farmers or whatever, they're going to want to get into it because they'll be attracted by the smell and see. So you want to cover it. And it can be covered with something very simple. But because that is a nitrogen that you only need like one part of, consider going ahead and adding your brown matter as you add it to your pile. So every time you would go out and throw your kitchen scraps, or you have grass clippings, think about adding some of the leaves that you have, or the cardboard. At your grocery stores, Costco's, you'll see these thin piece of cardboard in between them. Have you ever noticed that? Well, I asked them, what do they do with it? Well, they just throw it away. So you could ask them for that and get more to be able to put on there. They're so thin and easily composted. I just go ahead and put them there and watch the decomposition of those kind of things going on. Okay, you want to. So where you put it, what you put in it, the right ratio is important, and it's something that's naturally going to happen for you. Consider a new mindset today that there is nothing better to feed your plants than compost. And it's very simple. Is that simple enough that you could do that? And it is so useful and so helpful to divert that from our landfills. So I hope today I've given you something to think about, to inspire you to make a shift in how we think about those things. Thank you so much.